Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Point Man Podcast. I am your host, John Imperial. Unfortunately, Phil is not going to be here with us today while we do this interview, but I am going to be conducting the interview with Brian Johnson. Brian is a Army veteran. He is also a law enforcement veteran. He has suffered a few traumatic brain injuries and now works for the WarriorNow, I call it Foundation, but you can go on WarriorNow.org. I know it's a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to serving our nation's veterans who are impacted by mental illness, addiction, and suicide ideation. Brian and I had a great episode and really enjoyed the podcast. I had first heard him, as you'll hear in the interview, heard Brian on the Cleared Hot podcast, and about 20 minutes into the interview, I had to stop and find his email address, and I sent him an email, and honestly, probably within 10 minutes of sending that email, I had already had one back from him, or basically from his wife at the time, his still his current wife, but not just wife at the time. But his wife had sent me the email, and yeah, we were able to get Brian on the show, and we had a fantastic interview, and I really enjoyed it. Probably one of the best so far. That being said, before we get into the interview, I just wanted to let you guys know about the podcast. Scheduling lately has been quite a bit an issue, not on anyone else's end but mine, just with the normal 12-hour shifts and basically the rotation switching every couple of weeks. It's been hard to maintain a decent schedule to get everything edited and get it out basically on a weekly basis. But you know what? I do this as a hobby anyways, so not getting paid for it just yet. I told Phil, hopefully I can cut him a $10 check at one point in time. Who knows when that's going to be. But before that, we are still working on a few sponsorships for the podcast, which we will get a few promo codes as well. But one of those sponsors is going to be ChopFit. You can go online and find the Chopper Pro and the Chopper right online. And I know that they did have a Black Friday sale, but that is obviously over right now. But they do have a 10% off sale right now going on as well. So you go on there to chopfit.com and you can download their app as well. And you buy this, basically a rubber axe, a lot safer than a normal axe to use, but it does increase your workouts. If you know somebody that's, let's say they're new to working out, or part of the end of the shit show that is 2020 and hopefully a better year of 2021, who knows what's going to happen. But yeah, if you know somebody whose New Year's resolution is to start working out more, get them one of these. It's a good way to either change up your cardio game or your strength training game through basically just fun exercises and functional fitness. You can go online right now and get those in. If you order a few weeks out before Christmas, hopefully they'll show up before then with this whole COVID scheduling stuff that's going on right now. Other than that, I have nothing really new else to report. This episode was recorded a few weeks ago. It actually took me a while to get this out because of just different computer issues I was having at the time with my cheap-ass laptop. But yeah, if you guys have any questions, you can always shoot us a message on Instagram at Pointman Podcast. You can go onto our Twitter, and I haven't been really active on that because, you know what, just been trying to avoid it as much as possible. Definitely have to shut the notifications for that thing right off. But yeah, go on Instagram. You can like us. You can share our posts and whatnot. Go on Spotify, Apple iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play. Go on there. Give us a 5-star rating. Leave a few comments, hopefully, guys, and we'll get pushed up in the podcast world. Other than that, the links for WarriorNow will be found in the show notes for this episode. And with that, hey, Brian, welcome to the show, buddy.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
I appreciate it. I had heard you guys on, as we were just talking about the Cleared Hot podcast with Andy Stump, and I had to basically about 20 minutes into it. Hey, Brian, welcome to the show, buddy.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
I appreciate it. I had heard you guys on, as we were just talking about the Cleared Hot podcast with Andy Stump, and I had to basically about 20 minutes into it, I had put it on pause and emailed, I think it was Melinda, and, sent her an email saying, hey, I have to get you guys on my podcast just because of what you were talking about with Andy just had hit home with me. And it's an honor to actually have you on the show. And she had responded back pretty much immediately. I'd say about 20 minutes, and that rarely happens. So good on her for doing that.
Yeah, no kidding. I appreciate that as well.
So as we were just talking about, I have a cup of coffee in my hand, that Black Rifle Freedom Roast coffee. It's one of those. It's actually one of my favorite coffee brands in general, but actually one of the Freedom Roasts is probably my favorite blend of theirs. What you got going on over there today, Brian?
I'm sporting a nice cold glass of tap water.
Awesome. But you know what? There ain't nothing like that fresh tap water. You know what I
right?
mean? It's straight out of the faucet. Yeah. Straight out of the faucet. There's nothing better than that. None of this Dasani stuff or Smart Water, which is actually Smart Water. I'll just say it's probably my favorite bottled water. But that tap water, especially where you're from, is probably pretty good.
Yeah, it is. It's you can definitely taste the lead and the nutrients.
Yeah. Well, that's good. Where are you guys? Where are you from? Is it Colorado?
So anytime I get asked this question, I always give a caveat. So I'm from Texas.
Okay.
And anybody, if you ever talk to anybody from Texas, that's what they say. I've lived in Colorado for the last 20 years.
Okay. What part of Texas originally?
Dallas. In the if you know the area, it's Irving was the city I grew up in.
Okay. And did you stay there right before you went into the military?
I did not. No. So my folks, we packed up and moved out here the middle of my sophomore year of high school, and I finished out high school out here. So I've been out here ever since. Joined the military out here. Yeah, was a cop out here.
Why did your parents decide to move, especially middle of high school for you?
I think it was more about the opportunity. I try to remember this, and I actually haven't had that conversation with them. I lost a lot of my childhood memories, but I believe it was work opportunity. And then once you get out to Colorado from Texas, it's love Texas, hate the heat. Colorado, no heat.
Yeah. I've only been to Texas. Actually, I was stationed down in Fort Sam Houston, down in San Antonio for a little bit, and I mean, I think I was born in the wrong area. I mean, I love New England, but Texas itself is just beautiful. And I think that, and it's in my next life, I'll be born and grow up on a ranch down there.
Oh, yeah. If you can get past that summer heat, it's perfect. You're right. It's beautiful. It's green most of the year down there. It's the trees in that area, just they have that water, all that moisture. So the trees grow. It's pretty unique out there.
Yeah, it was weird. When I was down there in 2018, I think it was. It was one of the first times that the San Antonio area had snow and everything. It wasn't accumulating much. I think it was just a dusting on the ground, and it shut everything down. Just everything.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's the fun thing. So Texas, if it's in the forecast that it's going to snow, they will shut everything down the day before. It doesn't have to snow, but if it's in the forecast, it's like, nope, everyone stay home. It's not worth it.
Right. Oh, yeah. So you guys moved out to Colorado, and you said you enlisted into the military. How was that process? Talk to me about it.
Yeah, I had a somewhat of a fun little. I had a scholarship when I was in high school to go through ROTC through CU. I ended up not taking it. That was one of the things. My parents were I don't come from a big military or law enforcement family. There's only a few in my entire family, like a very, very extended family that did that.
Mm-hmm.
So I listened to them, and I dropped out of that initial contract, and then I waited until 9/11 happened, and I was just like, I got to do this. So it took me about a calendar year post 9/11. I was just like, I'm joining. So I joined right at the same time that I got hired on at Arapahoe County for the sheriff's office.
Mm-hmm.
And
at
they're
21 years old.
I was, yeah. So I think I actually, it would have been 22 when I joined the military, 21 when I was with Arapahoe.
Okay.
They gave me that little. They have a 5-year grace period basically. So if I go in and they would hold my job for me, which was so awesome because I had barely been there for any amount of time. I mean, I think it was like 10 months when I said, "Hey, I joined." So, but yeah,
How did
I
that
joined.
go over?
In the beginning was just like, I think the agency is a large agency, so you're the needs of the agency, needs of the military. You know that term.
Mm-hmm.
It was just I was just a number at that point in time. A brand new soul, just a young kid.
Yeah.
So I don't think.
Sorry to interrupt. My Phil, my co-host, who's usually here, he actually signed when he went into the Marine Corps as needs of the Marine Corps. And he completely understands that.
It's so true. But they were good to me. I mean, they kept my job for me. Like I said, they did the whole 5-year thing. I didn't take 5 years, so I joined as a reservist,
mm-hmm.
and I left for basic and AIT. And when I got back, or when I was leaving AIT, they sent around that hey, we're fighting a war, we need volunteers. So I said yes to the volunteer, and it took about 8 months after I got back. They came at me and said, "Hey, you're leaving again." So I had to go back to my agency and let them know, just so you know, I've only been here, a calendar, basically a calendar year, and I'm gone again. And then I was gone for a while too. It was about a 18-month deployment.
Oh, where was that to?
So it was final destination was Iraq. It took some training months out in Utah first, and then down to El Paso, and then to Kuwait, and then up into Iraq. And then once I finally got into Iraq, I was there just over a year. I want to say it was about 13, 14 months when I was boots on ground.
Wow, that's I knew I knew back then the Army was doing long deployments, but that's a long one.
It was very long. I mean, watching, because I was an attached person, so I volunteered. So I didn't even go with a unit that I knew. Mm-hmm. I got attached to a maintenance unit out of Utah, and then once I got over to Kuwait, I'm one of those guys. I mean, if anyone's listening and somebody tells you don't ever volunteer in the military, I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you the opposite. I actually had a blast, literally. But I had a blast.
You have good experiences with that. I mean, it goes either one way or the other with volunteering sometimes.
Oh, it so does. And I've heard so many horror stories, but unfortunately, I don't have one. I mean, I raised my hand when I got in Kuwait, and they said, "Hey, we need some wrecker operators." And wrecker's a tow truck for all my civilians out there. And so I was like, sure, I'll do that. I have no clue what I'm doing, but I'll do it. So they stuck me in a wrecker, and I mean, the rest was history. I was doing mounted missions with basically all across the northern theater of Iraq. I was just attached like it was coded QRF. I wasn't QRF. I don't want people to think that I'm like this, badass dude that just jumped into doors and stuff. Nah, I just picked up trucks. But yeah, I just went when they told me to go, and it was a lot.
I can imagine it. Just a lot, for you at such a young age, trying to even start your civilian career, and then to be told to head overseas for that amount of time, and to get dumped with a unit that you aren't familiar with. They don't really know anybody there, and for so long, it's just a neat experience. You said, don't ever volunteer in the military. We've kind of always, people in the military have heard that term for years now, but that's good to actually, be talking with somebody who has had a good experience with that.
Multiple.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just then. I volunteered a few times. But yeah, no, that was my combat tour. I volunteered again I went down to El Salvador for a just a dent ready mission for they had those mudslides out there, so they needed a lot of medical support. Well, again, I'm a mechanic. I'm not a dentist, and so I got boots on ground down there, and they're like, "Hey, we need a volunteer." And, here I am. My happy ass goes ahead and just raises his hand, and they gave me a camera, and they said, "Hey, you're now the PAO." Okay. By the way, we're doing this special war against gangs, and so we need you to cover some of this stuff. And I mean, it was really neat because mostly what I was covering was humanitarian aid. It was it was a lot of medical, dental. We were building the Navy was out there building their Corps of Engineers was building a schoolhouse that could withstand hurricane force winds as well as mudslides. They literally built the foundation like 50 feet into the ground. So this thing was, if the entire mountain left, the schoolhouse would still be there. Like that thing is going nowhere. So it was pretty cool. That actually turned me into one of the things that ultimately saved my life was photography. I mean, and we'll get to it on the show, I'm sure, but we talk about structure, camaraderie, and purpose, and that photography gave me a little bit of all three, but mainly that purpose piece. So
get out there and document everything that was going on and interact with. I suppose you were probably interacting with a lot of the local population doing that.
That's exactly right. Yeah, I was talking with the local law enforcement, the local journalists. In fact, I still keep in touch with one of the journalists that was out there. And
awesome.
It's just so cool. And that was 2011, and he and I have communicated. Luckily, Facebook was a kind of a new thing then. That's actually when I created my Facebook account, was on that deployment.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. It's definitely helped. I mean, I had to get off Facebook just for my own mental health, and a couple of years ago, and I've luckily have stayed off of it since then. But it's kind of one of the things that I do miss about it. I've had somebody, actually a college friend of mine, Instagram message me today, and a picture that came up 12 years ago, and it's I've missed that sort of stuff of it. But like you were saying, getting out there and meeting people it's definitely one of those things that you don't realize that when you're volunteering in the military that you can be doing and will be doing.
Oh, sure. And I first off, I'm envious that you're off social, or at least off Facebook.
Yeah. I thought about it. I don't have one for the podcast yet, and I am dragging my feet, and I do not want to start one, but
I know it's going to happen. Just keep dragging those feet. Maybe MeWe or Parler or all these new ones that are coming up. Who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah.
I mean, it's got its good, it's got its bad, and just like anything, you got to take it, just little bits at a time. If you're enveloped in just being on social media, it's a lose-lose.
I was listening to a Joe Rogan interview the other day, and he was actually talking to Tom Green. I don't know if you remember Tom Green.
Oh, yeah.
So he interviewed Tom, and he's and I guess I didn't know this before until listening to his interview with him. Tom actually has been like living out of his van in the middle of Texas in a few different areas, like going to document like the nature and all that sort of stuff, and he calls it post and ghost. You go make your post on social media and then ghost it and leave it alone, and don't interact with anybody else on there. So I'm like, that's probably the angle I would have to take with it if I started the Facebook account.
I think that's brilliant. I'm gonna take some of that. Post and ghost is fantastic because you don't have to want to wait for all that other nonsense.
Exactly.
That's pretty cool.
But so you were down there for how long in El Salvador?
El Salvador was just about a month. I mean, it was a real quick deployment. There was not much of a need out there. It was law enforcement was being trained up. When I got there, it was at the tail end of the it was called Beyond the Horizon, if I recall correctly.
Okay.
So it was just a short trip out there, but it was so cool because I mean it gave me putting that camera in my hand. I mean, and I've since I'm a internationally recognized photographer, and it's just
I
been,
didn't know that.
yeah. I don't. I mean, it's not one of the things that comes up in conversation. I don't really talk about it a lot, but I love photography. I love making pictures. It was something that just, I mean, it really did help with once after my suicide attempts, getting into something like that, something to give me that purpose again. Oh, it's just incredible. And I fell in love with, and I said it on the other podcast, Special Olympics. That's what
Yes.
So I love photographing for Special Olympics. It's one of my favorite things to do. It's just so cool to be around Special Olympic athletes and to see what they can overcome and see how they, I mean, it's just a neat experience, no matter what you do when you volunteer.
It is. I mean, Special Olympics, I know I have my experiences with it. I have a girl I'm trying to get on the podcast who's part of the, I don't know if I know Paralympics. She had lost her leg, and I know, I don't know if that qualifies under the Special Olympics, but I know that we do have a lot of interaction with the actual Special Olympics in our area, whether it's we're doing, I don't call them fun runs. I mean, it's a 15-mile run, the ones that we have to do in our area just to get down from one point to another. So I've done completely once, and that was terrible. But
running is terrible.
It is. It completely is. But and that was right when I came back from AIT, so it wasn't that bad. But yeah, so it's a 15-miler in our area, but actually they have the Special Olympic Games as well, and we can go down there and volunteer as as law enforcement. And the people that are participating in it, they love cops. I mean, I've never ever had a bad experience on the job with somebody who's in the special needs program. You know what I mean? And it's just it makes you feel good, and it's just something, like you said, it gives you purpose to go do, especially now if you're out there photographing it and interacting with them. It kind of, like you said, it has that purpose and that meaning behind it.
Yeah, it sure does. And you're right. I mean, the law enforcement community with Special Olympic athletes or just people with special needs, there's just a mesh there. That community has been, basically bullied and treated differently for centuries. And this, in the last 20 years, we really did, as a society, start looking at people with special needs as humans. And I think that's been really neat. So for the last 20 years, it's almost like we're trying to undo a lot of the that bullying, if you will, that they've endured. And it could just be as simple as the teachers just, hey, you need to stop acting out, or kids, getting onto these kids. But it was, they just weren't treated, as our atypical human beings. And I'm happy to live in a society today where we do treat them, like a friend, and not just like a clinical case, if you will.
Exactly. When I was in college finishing up, I think it was my junior year and into my senior year, I started working as a respite worker. And so I would go, I had one older gentleman, I was 20 at the time. He was probably 35 to 40 years old and had special needs. And my job was to either go to work with him. I know he made boxes, and so I'd, make sure that he was interacting with people well, and, kind of help him out, make sure he was doing it on his own and all that sort of stuff. And then one night a week for a couple hours, he wanted to go shoot pool. So I'd bring him out into the middle of Springfield, Massachusetts, which I don't know if you know about Springfield, but it's very much the inner city. And, but we would try to get him out there to interact with people, shoot pool, hang out with them. And it's an experience that I just loved. And it was early on in my career, but I got the most out of that. It was just an overwhelmingly good experience, and I recommend anybody to go do that sort of work, or go volunteer and do that as well. So when did your first combat deployment end? Was that the 03-04 time frame?
No, so that would have been I went in at the end of '03, and
Okay.
AIT, I think I completed AIT middle of '04, and then April 22nd was the day that I went on orders. And then my daughter, I always have to talk about this, she was born May 11th. So when I left, when I got back, so I left in '05, April 22nd, '05. I got back in September of '06. And, here's my daughter basically walking and talking.
A year and a half old.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was tough. But, I had a good family support. We were able to communicate. I was able to do videos. I was just talking with my mom the other day, and she was telling me that they set up for her birthday. I was on Zoom, and she said she was falling asleep. Unfortunately, I don't remember this, but I was on Zoom while I was in Iraq, and it was just kind of neat to be able to have that experience early on in the war. I mean, today, technology is out there. We can do that all the time, but back then, doing something, and I don't recall what it was back then. I don't think it was Zoom, but it could have been whatever way we
Skype
did video.
Or whatever it was.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, no, you're saying just to have that back in '05 when stuff wasn't as built up as it is now, and technology wasn't as good as it is now either, to have that. But I can only imagine did it take a toll on you coming back with her already said, like you said, walking and talking, and a year and a half, when you left, she wasn't born yet, and you come back and she's a year and a half old. So what was, if you want to get into it, I mean,
yeah, no, that's a good, I mean, I haven't yet to talk about this. And so we're going to explore this together. When I got back, first off, I changed, right? Like, let's just face it, war changes people. And I don't know if it was for the better or for the worse. I ended up going on and getting, multiple divorces. So obviously that change created a barrier for me to connect with other humans, but I had a very good relationship with my kids. So yeah, when I got back, it was one of those things where I wasn't a dad when I left, and I had never been a dad before leaving. So I had to learn how to be a dad, but I'm learning when my child is a year and a half old, and that's different, right? Like I didn't get to experience the, holding them whenever they're infant and just feeding them and then, laying with them. And I see the lighter side of it. I understand that, babies cry. I had a second one, a boy, and he was fantastic in his infancy stages. So I can only imagine that she would have been equally as fantastic. But yeah, it was different. I mean, it was coming home and trying to be a father. Not only that, I'm a young, I still haven't really been a cop yet. In fact, when I got back, I was still finishing up my police academy time. Wow. And so I'm starting a career, a dad of a daughter who's a year and a half old. And it was tough. I mean, it was trying to figure out balancing everything, taking care of the family, while also actually not dealing with it, but not knowing that I had to deal with, all the mental illness and the T.B.I, the PTSD, the stuff that was just really impacting me.
Yeah, I can imagine, come home to that change. And how did she, as a year and a half year old, come deal with you, I guess, coming into the house? You had said, like, obviously she was probably able to see you on, the video calls and all that sort of stuff, but didn't probably comprehend at the time. Was as a toddler, was she dealing with it okay, or was it something that was a transition for her as well?
I would assume that there had to have been a transition. I don't recall that there was one.
Okay.
So, yeah, when I got home, my first memory of coming home, because I flew back into El Paso, and my first memory was of seeing her. She walked up to me and gave me a hug.
Okay.
So,
awesome.
Yeah, it's almost like we never missed a beat, even though that beat never really got started. Now, I did get to do my 2 weeks for R&R.
Yep.
So I did get to come home and see her for R&R, and I think that she was young. I just don't have a memory.
Yeah,
I have photos of it, but I just don't have a memory of how that interaction was, and I think she was relatively young.
Now let's go into, if you don't mind me asking, can we go into why this is one of the reasons why I wanted to get you on the podcast is, I have also, like we were talking about prior to the recording starting, prior to this, I've suffered a few TBIs myself, either from football or motorcycle accidents, essentially, and a few others. I think probably on the range as well. So, yeah, can we get into why your memory is like, you keep bringing that up as you can't remember things, and I just want to have you explain it a little bit if you can.
Yeah, so I suffered several TBIs, and since we've studied a lot about it. I'm not a scientist, so for all of our doctors and stuff out there that are listening, if I give inaccurate information, please correct me. But basically, when I suffered some TBIs,
if there are doctors listening to me, I'm going to be happy. So I hope there
exactly. Yeah. But yeah, no, there's my understanding is there's 3 levels of traumatic brain injury. So there's, you get rattled, you get a little whiplash. Then you get the second one is, the dizziness. You get hit so hard that you actually have, disorientation. And then the most severe, which is unconscious. So you're out. You see the MMA fights, that's the most common way to say it. And, they get hit so hard that they basically just go down and they're sleeping. Yeah. So I've had all 3, but more importantly for me and in my care, I've had 3 class 3 or whatever you call that on that severe level where I was not completely out. And that was, it was, again, no heroics here, so you're not going to get a whole big old story. I was underneath I was recovering a LMTV. I was wrapping the chains around. LMTV. Oh yeah. That was right when they first got. We learned how to drive them. The first time we got them was in war, so it was kind of neat to see the. Yeah. No more deuce and a half. Luckily, those LMTVs were a lot better. But wow. I was putting the chains around one of the axles, and an IED went off probably about anywhere between 50, 75 meters away. Not far enough away that I heard the explosion without feeling any of the overpressure, any of the pressure. But it caused me to jerk my head straight up into the axle, knocked me completely unconscious. I mean, I was out cold. So that was one. The second one I had was a vehicle incident. My driver, which I will not name, drove up the switchback. We're going up to the northern border, and there's a mountain range up there. And in that wrecker's a big guy. So it's once you start going up those hills, if you're not going fast enough, you're basically 5 mile an hour in it. And that convoy's leaving you quick. But he tried to take it quick on this little switchback that we always get slowed down on, and just a little too quick. It drove into the side of the mountain. So my side of the cab was just completely crushed. That one knocked me out cold again. And then I did some amateur MMA fighting. I got trained in the Army, and then went on to do some stuff around town as well. And then I did a little bit with law enforcement. But so then once I got my bell rung one time. I got my bell rung a lot, but once I got that official clenching your hands down on the ground, people wondering if you're sleeping or not, I was like, okay, all right, I think I'm done. I think my head has told me you can't continue doing this. And those are the ones that I remember. Yeah. So, yeah. So just a couple.
Yeah. No, just like you said, how long, that first time, how long were you out for?
Oh, I don't even remember, because once that IED went off, they set up a perimeter. And then I remember at one point in time, somebody coming up on the in a Humvee saying, "Hey, hurry up."
That's it, huh?
So I have no clue. There's no time log for any of that stuff. And we have a 2-man team. when we're doing these things. But once something happens like that, you basically go to the cab. The protocol is you just go back to the cab. We don't have the wrecker's not a gun truck, so we rely on everyone else to protect us. So they circled around us, and I'm just sitting there. Luckily, I was in between the wheels. Yeah, so if any indirect or fire, small arms fire came in it, I mean, I didn't have anything close to me that I recall. And I don't have that timeline, no.
Did you, if you can remember, did you go to medical at all or anything like that? Did you even talk to the medics about it?
Yeah, so in this, luckily when you go to war, and I don't know if this has changed, but when you go to war back in 05, 06, all that stuff really wasn't kind of set up properly. So, yeah, I saw the medic and like, oh, hey, yeah, you got your bell rung. That's all they ever say.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
So, I that's it though.
So
there's
you
no
change your
log.
shocks and take some Motrin.
That right. Here's some
I'm
dirt.
a medic, so I completely understand.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I talked to the medic, but they don't log that stuff. And so that was real difficult when I started really trying to figure out what was wrong. So I had no clue I was diagnosed with a TBI until I was diagnosed with it later on in life. So we had to go back in time to figure this stuff out because they were treating me for PTSD. So they were giving me, you can give medication for PTSD. You really can't give medication for TBI. PTSD has a way of kind of taking over and creating a hypervigilant, an anxiety filled mind frame whenever you're dealing with some things. And so you can take some medication to help out with the anxiety. You can take some medication to help out with nightmares, things like that. Damage to the brain is a completely different story. And so what was happening was I was taking all these medications while not understanding why things were happening. So obviously memory loss being a big thing, I was dealing with that, and then getting agitated and things like that. I was like, I didn't understand why, because I couldn't comprehend certain things. Like I'm very forgetful around like I'll just take an example. In my current house, we lived here for almost 2 years. The missus, she likes her cabinets a certain way. She wants the glasses and the cups in one cabinet and the plates in the other, and the silverware in a different one. Well, I've been going to the same wrong silverware cabinet for 2 years. Like at some point in time that has to stop, but that's the difference between PTSD and TBI. TBI, I'm going to continue going to that wrong silverware cabinet. PTSD, I go to the wrong one and I freak out. So that's kind of and then you're like, okay, I need to go to the other one. Like that's the difference if you look at it that way.
And the only reason why I'm laughing at that is because my fiance, who will listen to this in the future, when I go to her house, I get the same exact thing. It's you've been coming here for how long now? The cups are not in that cabinet. So I can only imagine that when she's listening to this, she's going to start laughing. But you're right. It like you said, it is an injury to the brain, whereas we can understand why at least you have, PTS or PTSD, why that may be happening. But like you said, with an injury to the brain, it's hard to recognize that next step as it's like, oh, you have this injury, and to get to that next level of recognizing that you do have an injury to your brain and how to start correcting it I don't want to say fixing it, but that whole connection level is something that you have to, I think people have to recognize in themselves if they're dealing with that, or loved ones who are, around somebody perpetually. That's making those next steps, especially with, I'm not a doctor like you say. I've read a few things, but at the same time, I correct me if I'm wrong, or if I'm wrong, or whoever. Just making those next steps and those connections between, okay, I have that injury. I have, we have to get this figured out, and yeah. So you would receive that first one when you're overseas, and you come back. And did you start? Or what were, besides the memory, what other things did you notice were going on with you at that point in time, with either physically regarding the concussion, or emotionally and all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, laziness. I went through a period of because when I joined the military, I was a very fit person. I was always working out. Post TBI, it's real hard to get motivated to work out, and that's just been one of the things. So I that really hit me hard. I've always been a very motivated type individual, and I still mentally and emotionally am. I just have to convince myself that I have to continue to work out. And we all know that the good health, working out, leads to healthy mind as well. And that's
Right.
That's something that I gave up for a little bit. And I mean, that sent me down that dark spiral. And then agitation. I couldn't handle certain situations unless I had a uniform on, which was a unique mindset. But I could be around people and address people appropriately when I had a uniform on. When I had my uniform off, I felt it was like there was nothing guarding me from I don't want to say lashing out. I wasn't like this angry person, but I did fall into some severe anger, at some of the points. But yeah, it was I wouldn't go around public places if it was filled with people. That took me a while to get back to where I can be amongst society. And obviously, being law enforcement and military, we understand what it's like to not want to go into a public place because we see the worst of the worst in our society here and society abroad. And but yeah, that was a hard thing to do, to get a grasp on it. And just really the hardest thing for me was understanding and kind of accepting the fact that change happened. Like my head is not the same. I need to address this, and I got to start figuring this out. And we don't want to accept that, as cops and as soldiers. That's a weakness, and that was one of those things that you just kept pushing off. And I did that until it was too late. And that's one of the things I hope that the listeners take away. If there's something there, you got to say something. Just address it right now.
Right. That kind of leads me to, I always, and people probably get sick and tired of me saying this, but number one, if they had called it a brain mechanic, I'm stealing Jocko Willink's, I don't know if you listened to him, but I'm stealing his quote or phrase, but if they called it a brain mechanic, I would have probably gone sooner. Or they, because obviously when your car gets out of alignment, what do? Bring it down to the mechanic and it gets fixed. But if you don't do that and you let your car go, then it's going to need that major overhaul. And then same thing with regards to your brain. Once it gets a little bit out of alignment, you bring it to the brain mechanic, and then you're back fine and you're working properly. But if you don't and you let it, I say fester, but it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse, then eventually a couple of years down the line, you're going to have that major overhaul where you're going to have some serious counseling to go through. And yeah, it's just like you said, you got to recognize that your brain's not working properly or like it should. For me, I know that my personality, I don't want to say it's changed since my concussions. I've had, like you said, every those three levels. I've had numerous in football where it's, every time I went to go tackle somebody. I only played up until my senior year of high school, but every time I went to go, make contact with somebody, you have that momentary blackout. When you go to, tackle somebody, you see black for a second, and then you're back to it. But every single time you hit somebody, it's a form of trauma to your brain. And, and I've had probably a handful of ones in that mid-range category, and then I've had 2 motorcycle accidents, one where I nearly killed myself and was knocked out completely unconscious and broke my nose, my jaw. I lost a bunch of teeth. And then the second one where I was wearing a helmet, thank God, but cracked my helmet in 2. And so it was, for me, after all those concussions, and I haven't had any since the last motorcycle accident, but, recognizing that my personality has changed, and good, bad, or indifferent, it just has. I know that I'm short-tempered with a lot of different things that have happened in my life, but I started going through therapy, and it took me till my 3rd therapist to actually find out, like, hey, we need to attack this problem head on before we work on the relationship issues, because if you don't fix this problem with your brain and start going through cognitive therapy and working on that portion of your brain, then the relationship issues, if we just work on those, it doesn't matter, because we didn't strike the problem head on. And so, yeah, I guess I went off on a tangent, but
That's an important one though, because I mean, that's exactly what happens to us is if we don't address it. I mean, you're basically looking at, I work with a lot of vets in addiction. And one of the things I talk about is the fact that once you've got an addiction itself, you got 3 places to go. And this is the same thing that I always tell people when it comes to mental health as well. I mean, you can go to jail, you can go into the grave, or you can go to rehab. That's pretty much it. If you have unaddressed mental health issues, that's it. I mean, those are the 3 locations. So figure out what you want to do.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good way of putting it. And then, yeah, I don't even know any better words to say that than myself. So you came back and you had these things going on in your life with the major life changes at home, but the newborn, and then your brain and mental health issues. Then you started, like you said, you had just started finishing up your police academy, right?
Yeah. So I was I became an active cop. I did that for many years while just taking my medication. In fact, I didn't take medication for my depression, anxiety for years after Iraq. All of a sudden, it got to the point to where, because I'm divorcing multiple times. I'm not being able to like create new relationships. I'm letting current relationships expire. Just not seeking that human interaction outside of work. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, I finally decided to go ahead and start doing that medication piece of the puzzle. Was finding a therapist, and if you got a first time go when it comes to a therapist, awesome. But don't go into a therapist thinking that it's going to work right then, and it doesn't.
Exactly. The first one I went to, I swear to God, he couldn't tell me my name if I asked him because he was looking out the friggin' window the entire time. Yeah, it was just it's like you said.
They're humans too. There's good ones and there's bad ones. Let's just face it.
Exactly. Like anything else.
Yeah. You're not going to relate with every single one of them either. I had a great one on my second go, but there was just no relation. I mean, she was fantastic. She just wasn't I really needed to understand that T.B.I differentiation between the T.B.I and the PTSD. And so I didn't get that help until I saw a psychiatrist. That's when they're like, these medications basically should be helping, when in fact they were hurting everything. So
is that because they weren't getting towards the root cause of the problem with head injuries?
Yes, that's exactly right. Okay. So they were addressing, I mean, they were perfect medications for the PTSD part of it, but the issue wasn't, I don't want to say the issue wasn't the PTSD, because that plays a role as well, right? Like if your brain sees something, it's not always going to say, hey, that was normal. And that's okay. PTSD happens, PTS happens. So if you can get past that, right? Like you got to address it. You just got to, unfortunately, sometimes you got to talk about it and go see a therapist and stuff like that, but it helps. You get beyond that, you get that brain injury, which is the TBI. Some of those medications have a transverse effect on who you are as a person. And I was on so many anti-anxiety medications. And I mean, basically I was on medications that would slow my heart, in addition to because I had some physical injuries, obviously, with everything that occurred. So I was taking some pretty serious pain medication as well.
I can imagine if you were able to take an axle to the head that you would have some injuries after that sort of stuff, other than the head stuff. Right? If you're able to brush that off, then But yeah, I can imagine you had some other things going on as well.
Yeah, I did, and I grew into and at that point in time, I was having my pain medication, which was a lot of Vicodin, and a lot of oh goodness, I can't think of the name, Xanax type stuff.
Okay.
So they gave me those combos, and at one point in time, I was even on morphine, Vicodin, and Xanax, which is just a stupid combo. Yeah. And I got good at asking my doctors for these things, because once for me, So I had an active addiction to Vicodin. I fell in love with the feeling. I fell in love with the fact that I felt like this is who I can be for the rest of my life. All of a sudden, my relationships were going good, so I attributed everything to being on Vicodin. So if I was on Vicodin, everything was going to go hunky dory, and it sure did not. Because you got to come off of that stuff, and once you come off of that stuff, it's horrible. So yeah, taking all my pain medications along with my psych medications. Holy cow! I mean, it's an incredible miracle that I did not die just from an OD on those things.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, like you just said, like the fact that you didn't die on those things while going through all those issues, and you were obviously an active cop while you were taking all that cocktail, essentially, correct?
Yeah. So at one point in time, I was, I would take my medication to go to work. That's how bad it got, and so I would sit there and I would show up high on Vicodin, and I always.
Anyone at work know what was going on?
No, and if you've ever been on Vicodin, it's one of those things where it's like, it's just a behavior enhancer, is what I call it. So as long as you don't, I guess, abuse it. And that's the one thing I took the amount prescribed. I never really did go beyond, luckily. And I think that's how I was able to get off of it as effectively as I was, by not taking more. I would randomly run out prior to my month supply end, but I would never take more than the allotted daily amounts and stuff like that. So, but yeah, no, I would take it just to go to work sometimes. My dog just came next to me. Sorry, he's gonna.
No, it's fine. Go right ahead. What kind of dog?
He's a Labradoodle. He's got a full body mohawk too. So I'll send a photo of that.
All right, we'll put him up there on the podcast or on the Instagram.
I like it. In fact, he was originally. I was so bad that my doctor prescribed me to get a service dog, and that's what he was originally. And then, yeah. So I mean, I got so bad that multiple suicide attempts. Couldn't keep a relationship, was constantly leaving people. Even my current wife, I had asked her to leave early on in our relationship, just because I was still trying to get a handle on everything. Just incredible to go down that dark path and basically have every single, I guess, prescription that you can get to include a service dog and still not want to be here. Like there was just something was so wrong, and I'm just fortunate I was able to get past it all. And he's not even a service dog. He finished training, but yeah, I don't have to take him anywhere. I feel very fortunate. I got that mental fortitude back, and I call myself fit for duty today. It took me some years. It took me lots of therapy, but yeah.
Well, let's unpack a little bit of that if you don't mind. I've worked for a few different police departments in my career, and each one has had their own, I don't want to say issues or anything like that, but each one has had their own way of dealing with officers who are going through mental health crises or crises. I don't know what the actual term is. I'm not an English scholar, but a mental health crisis. And how was your agency dealing with that? Did they know that you were going through any sort of issues at all? Did your superiors or your road sergeant come to you and say, hey, man, Brian, I know obviously I can see the change in your physical appearance or your attitude or whatever it is, and did they offer you a chance to unpack what was happening?
Oh, man. So when I was knee deep in it, I got real good at keeping it under wraps. Okay. I'm still very active in my the agency of Arapahoe County. In fact, I do the trading cards for police. I have the contract where I do their trading cards. Okay. I go in and I talk about veteran mental health and stuff like that. So still very connected with them. But then I was just over there recently because of the vet court is actually attached to the court's attached to the jail. And some of the cops that I used to work with, they heard that podcast and they're like, dude, I had no clue. And it's like, I mean, that's the thing is we think about this. Think about the last time you lost somebody to suicide. Did you have a clue? And for the most part, I always hear no, you don't.
Not at all.
Because once you're there, you keep it silent around you so well. And I did. I kept it away from everybody.
And yeah, I mean, you say that. My first friend I knew who killed himself, he, like you said, it's, you know, would have no idea that he was going through any sort of issues whatsoever. And he, like, you know, always one of those happy-go-lucky, always had a smile on his face sort of guys. But when you get to that point, I mean, you think of the reasons that you shouldn't be here are as real as the desk that I'm, you know, doing this interview on right now, or, you know, the mic or the computer. They are as real as anything else around you at that point in time. And, you know, you start thinking of, like, those relationships. I'm not speaking for you, but speaking, I'm not saying in my own experience, but you know, those relationships are going downhill, and you start thinking of like why people would be better off without you, or in all of that. So
yeah,
it's just it's a lot to unpack. But you did you seek from your department any sort of resources from them at all at that time?
So we had a peer support program. I'm sure you guys have one. It was somewhat new early in the you know, the early 2000s. But we had one of those organizations where the deputies and the sergeants, whoever, that was an appointed position, and you would get trained on it, and you would just kind of be there and available for people. We had that available. We had, you know, we have our psych doctor assigned to the agency for, you know, critical incidents, as well as, you know, employment fatigue, law enforcement fatigue, stuff like that. It was all there. I just never I didn't want to be known as that guy. And so I chose not to my detriment. So don't let that be known, you know, for you or for anybody. If you feel like you're going to be that guy, think about the last time you talked to that guy. You don't refer to him as that guy. You refer to him as, man, I'm just so glad he reached out. That's that stigma thing that we got to get rid of. But yeah, I was there.
I don't worry about that guy or the guy or girl who's actually reaching out for help. I mean, obviously I do, but I don't worry about them nearly as bad as I worry about, man, that guy's over there. He's going through something, and he's not talking about it. As a matter of fact, he's doing the opposite things. He's drinking himself to death, or whatever he is doing. He's taking, you know, risky behavior or anything like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so you knew about those peer support, or obviously the peer support group, and what was it leading up to your first suicide attempt? If you would like to get into that, we can. You know, what was it that made you decide at that point in time that was the only option for you?
So once I realized that there were no other options, I got there. So I had been going to treatments, I had been going to therapies, I've been taking medication, and then I got to the point to where it was, you know, my pain doctor was like, "Hey, we got to take you off this Vicodin." So that was kind of like the start of it. Like I didn't want to live because I would come off of that, and then I wouldn't be part of my family, and I was using it as a crutch for living. And then just the nightmares compounded, the depression really kicked in, and then you couple that with coming off of medication, and that was the trifecta that really did it in for me. And so when I finally decided, the day that I decided, it just kind of happened. I knew I wanted to do it because I'd been planning, I'd been fantasizing about it for a while. I at one point in time, I would spend, and I don't know how many months I did this, probably close to 6 months, but I would practice, and you know what it's like being a law enforcement officer with your duty weapon.
Mm-hmm.
I would dry fire in the closet just so I can get that comfort of pulling the trigger when I'm not pointing it at a threat. Mm-hmm. So I would desensitize myself, and I got to the point to where I can happily just pull that trigger. It just felt normal. It felt natural. Like, okay, this is good. This is going to work. Luckily, that was not my first attempt. Was not the firearm attempt. I tried to hang myself, and that was the sensation. I've always hated being choked. I got choked multiple times in fights, and I hate that sensation. And then when I decided that day, I mean, I just went in and I took my sapper belt and I just went. I was ready, and I just dropped down. And if it wasn't for it was mainly intervention. I just don't see how I was able to, but I was able to catch my balance, and I was able to climb myself back out of that without breaking my neck. I had serious marks on my neck though, for a long time, weeks after that, if not maybe even months. But yeah, that was. I don't know if it was necessarily one thing. It was a conglomerate of multiple things that were kind of happening in my life. I was just not happy being around people. I was trying to get, to go through a second divorce. I was, to get coming off medication, going on different medication. And I was just like, this is it. I just don't want to be around for this anymore. This didn't seem like the way humans should live. That was it.
Yeah, that's definitely a lot. What the guys that you were working with, could they physically see any marks on your neck, or you just said that they were prevalent?
Oh yeah, they were there. I'm sure somebody saw. Nobody said anything. But the thing is that my agency and undershirts, we could wear those quarter long neck things.
The quarter turtlenecks.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that's what I wore. Plus, if you've ever seen me, they call me no neck because of one of my injuries. I mean, I don't stand up straight, so everything is was kind of hidden. It was easy to hide.
Gotcha. I seen you from the Andy Stumps podcast, and I mean, if you had the beard back then, that
Yeah, they wouldn't let me have a beard at my agency, and I'm pretty mad at them right now because they've laxed their beard policy. So, and they allow people to have beards. Obviously, not as long as how mine is.
Did you grew that completely out of spite of your military and law enforcement service, just because you can now?
I did, yeah. So, I mean, I literally shaved my entire life, and in basic, I went to Leonardwood. I had to shave twice a day. Yeah. My hair grows so quick that they made me carry a Bic in my shirt, and after lunch formation, I would have to shave in front of everybody. A second time. Yeah. So I got real good at dry shaving. Yep.
Oh God, that sounds painful.
And that is my freedom beard, which is my personal brand as well. Freedombeard.com is mine. So, oh yeah.
That's awesome. Did you trademark that yet?
Not yet, but I think I need to. I don't actually have a living logo yet. I've gone through several different logos. But yeah, once I finalize it, I think I will have to.
Awesome. Oh God, yeah. No, so yeah, getting back into it, it seemed like, you were at that place where, you could think of so many other options or so many other reasons for, taking your own life and to, not be here anymore. And what was it that made you start seeking help? If it makes any sense.
It does. So when I first started going through my suicide attempts, I had come to peace with the fact that I felt like kids, and I felt everybody around me was better off without me. That changed at a moment when so I had lost a friend of mine. He was an Air Force vet. He was also an Arapahoe County Sheriff's deputy. I had quit the agency in 2014.
Was that because of everything you had going on at that point?
It was, yeah. So I was done. Like, I had to figure something out, and I knew I had to take my I only had VA and Kaiser,
Okay.
and I was not getting the level of care that I felt we weren't identifying the problems. And if I didn't do this, I wouldn't be here today. So I quit. I cashed out my retirement. We started a for-profit company for my wife, and then I took the rest of that money and I put it into my own personal care, and I started seeing a specialist out of it was all for physical stuff at this point in time, but I was seeing somebody so I can get this under control. Once I got the physical stuff under control, or partially under control, I started addressing my mental health. I found a therapist through the VA, and I ended up doing a prolonged exposure therapy, which was very intense. And I can't tell people what to do and what not to do. I can tell you my experience with this was difficult. I did not enjoy it, but it worked. So it's a very intense therapy. It really did help me uncover a few things. It allowed me to open up a little bit more. It allowed me to open up with people around me. And then, I mean,
prolonged exposure is essentially getting you used to whatever that stimulus is, correct?
That's it. That's exactly it. Yep.
So it's getting you used to whatever that stimulus that is. I don't know what the word is I'm looking for right now, but whatever that stimulus that is there that for lack of a better term, I guess, upsets you. Just getting you used to being around it and used to dealing with it, and either talking. It's probably either starting off with talking about it, and then actually going and being near that thing, whatever it is.
Correct. Yeah. No, that's it. And that's dealing with that prolonged exposure. I had gotten to the point once I started doing that, I hated people. I hated everybody, obviously, except for my family, my kids. But I hated everything around me, sans my family. And like, that's not okay. And I'm a very cheery guy. I've always been that way. Sense of humor, all that good stuff. I like to talk to people. Man, when you take that and you just turn that switch off and all that just stays inside. I mean, I was like a ticking time bomb. So I'm so happy that I was able to get through that prolonged exposure. In fact, I didn't complete it. My therapist, if you ever do listen to this, I'm sorry I didn't go to the very last appointment.
What's up with that?
But it worked. Okay, we're good. I'm checking that box.
Did you just miss the last appointment, or
I hated it? I told you, man, I hated that therapy. That was some of the most intense therapy. I hated talking about these things, and towards the end of it, I started seeing things that I thought were gone. In fact, I didn't have a memory of it, so I started seeing some of the events that I had to, when I recovered vehicles. They were vehicles that got hit by, IEDs and stuff like that. So, what I'm finding on the inside of these vehicles. And
yes,
so,
I completely.
Yeah, exactly. And I had to go in there and I'd have to, adjust the steering wheel or the transfer case and stuff like that. And it was some of those things. I mean, when I got to the end of that prolonged exposure, what I saw then, I had no memory of it prior to. So it was one of those things that was taken from me. I think either mentally my mind said, hey, you don't want to see this ever again, or the TBI erased it. But then it came back in this moment, and it hasn't left. But one thing that therapy does, it allows me to say, hey, it's okay that I see these things. I don't have to respond to them the same way that I used to. So luckily it worked. And like I said, I'm sorry I didn't go to the last one.
Hey, it worked. It's just, you know what? You had overload at that point in time, and hey, that's all right. You're here. It's working. you had sought that help that you needed, and it sounded like you were getting a divorce when you first tried committing suicide, right?
I was. In fact, I was
Okay.
both attempts, same divorce. And I mean, I just didn't have a handle on my mental health, and so I went through. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm also in that club as well, as a divorce club. So
Yep.
I understand. We didn't have any kids or anything like that, and I have made it known on the podcast that I'm divorced. But reasons why it happens. There's obviously three sides to everything. So
Sure.
hers, mine, and the truth. So without getting into it, it's after I was married when I had my two severe concussions, and she could recognize that there was a change in I don't want to say my attitude or my personality, but with some things. And obviously I was going through I was in a bad relationship at the time. So that in itself was a stressor towards my mental health. But she had recognized that I was, I'd say snippy, because it just aggravates me. But short, I guess would be a better word, with regards to certain topics or something like that. And did you have anybody pointing out to you, you probably did, but was there anything going on, be like, hey, this is what's going on? Were other people able to recognize within you that there was something not right going on or happening?
I'm trying to remember. I don't think, but I know it existed. That's the problem. I knew I was, and I'll use the same word, snippy. Like I would get that agitated feeling, that agitated immediate response to things. And when it's such an odd thing. So when I divorced my second wife, I did it because I didn't want to direct that. I can feel myself where I was going. I can feel that anger bottling up, and I definitely did not want to direct that towards a human. And so for me, it made the most sense. I needed to be by myself. I needed to be alone, and I needed to take care of things myself. And that was kind of like the severing the ties thing. Was the whole point was so I can go ahead and take care of myself.
Gotcha.
Eternally take care of myself. So yeah, it just man, it was tough. But no, I don't recall. Obviously, if I talk to my exes, I'm sure that would come up. So yeah. I would.
Well.
Yeah.
So, I completely get it. No, I was just curious. But now you left law enforcement in 2014, 13 or 14.
I'm trying to make sure I put the right date on this. It was 2014.
Okay.
So I was 12 years, 2002 to 2014. So 2014.
Okay. And were you that entire time, did you promote or anything like that?
I did, yeah. So I initially was hired on as a civilian, and I did traffic safety. So I set up the signboards and ran the speed traps and that stuff. I worked in the jail, clicking the buttons, opening up and closing the doors. So then I became a cop. Once I became a cop, I got appointed to a bunch of different units. I was a part of the CIT, crisis intervention, and then
which is basically, is that hostage negotiation for you guys?
So hostage negotiation would be a separate organization, or part of the organization. It's basically hostage negotiation for people in severe mental illness.
Okay.
So yeah,
I'm on the SWAT team, and we have our own CNT. We call it crisis negotiation team.
Exactly. So that would be the training that I went through. Was that exact training? I was a flagship. I was one of the very first people to go through that, and I mean, I just fell in love with it. I was like, I can talk to verbal judo, all that good stuff. And then I went over to courts. I finished out my career in courts, and then right as I was right when I quit, I was on the sergeant's list, and I'll never forget the conversation. The sheriff literally told me, he goes, "Dude, 1 week, you're seriously getting promoted in 1 week." I was just like, I can't, man. I gotta figure this out. There's something wrong with me, and I don't know what it is.
Did he meritoriously promote you at that point in time so you could just leave as a sergeant or no?
Yeah. So he told me, he goes, call yourself a sergeant. But I never did get, my stripes or anything like that. So I left before officially getting promoted.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So I had a great career. I got a lot of awards, highly recognized, really cool. At one point in time, I even intercepted anthrax
Wow.
getting mailed to John McCain and Obama.
You physically intercepted it.
Yeah, it turned out to be soap. So again, no heroics on my part. However,
I was gonna say, did you get your anthrax shot while you were in the military? You'd be all set.
Yeah, but it was funny because it shut down the Pentagon. It shut down Arapahoe County. Like, it was so funny and it was soap.
Somebody mailed them Dove, and it shut the entire government down.
But yeah, it's cool because I got recognized for that. I mean, I had a great career, but I was able to, again, I think it was all, you put that uniform on, and I know you feel it. I know other people feel it. You're able, it's a mask, if you will. This is who I am right now. I can fight a war. So when I was in the Army, I could fight a war no matter what was going on in my head. When I was a cop, I could fight that battle no matter what. Didn't care what was going on with my head. As soon as I got home, though, then it was like, okay, now I got to fight this battle here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, definitely. And was there any sort of, I mean, obviously there was a transition for you because you're going from Army to law enforcement, same sort of job title, essentially. Not really. One fights wars and the other one takes care of people at home, but now you had a transition because you left because you needed to work on yourself. But at that point in time, you left the law enforcement. Did you have you cashed out your entire retirement at that point in time, and I assume probably paid some bills and used that as your sort of income, but did you have another plan after that?
No, I just wanted to figure this out. Because once I quit, I was already post attempt. So I don't have an attempt after I quit law enforcement. Actually, at this point in time, I wanted to live. And so I was taking this money, and my only plan was figure out how to be a happy human. Like, I gotta figure this out. So I put a lot of,
that's a good thing.
Yeah. And I put a lot of that effort into my back. My back causes me, and it still causes me a lot of issues, but I no longer, you probably heard it, but I only take vitamin C. So I don't take any medication. I've been away from all medication. I'll take ibuprofen, the good old military Motrin, Ranger candy. I'll take that randomly. But I don't have to take medication anymore. And that's including all of my mental health meds. And I'm not saying people, hey, get to the point where you don't have to take mental health meds. If you need it, you need it. Just take it. But I was in a situation where I was being prescribed medications for something that was not. It was an issue, but it wasn't the underlying issue, and the underlying issue was the T.B.I. And I think, so taking up that photography. So I started giving myself a little bit of purpose. Started giving myself, because I would. It would cause me that structure to learn how to do something. I can create something with my hands. I was a pretty fantastic artist prior to my TBIs, and that's one of the things I forgot how to do was how to draw. And that's been difficult for me because I used to be able to create, beautiful artwork, and now I can't. But now I can do that with my camera. And so even though I can't do it, that's it. Yeah. That's it. And so I've learned how to do that pretty well, and that's really helped me out a lot. And I typically can't go on this story without talking about the time that I died. Once I got to the point where I would fantasize about dying. Then I got to the point where I was fantasizing about living, and that's whenever I died. So I had a contrast MRI. They stuck me in the tube. The contrast caused anaphylactic shock. And then I can't remember what type of fibrillation it is, but basically my heart stopped. And so when I came out of that, all that physical pain, that was 2015, all that physical pain that I was dealing with was almost non-existent. Like, it was insane because it was bad.
No, you said
like,
you had a contrast MRI, and I'm not too sure about what that is, but anaphylactic shock, I mean, it's kind of obviously you're allergic to something. So were you allergic to the medications that they were giving you during the MRI? Is that it, or?
So that's a question that's still up for debate, and I'd love to figure that out, but I'm afraid to go back. No. So what happened was, so there I was. So I got the nurse was putting in, or the phlebotomist, what I don't know what their title is, was putting in the contrast into my vein. According to the ER doctor, they did not get the contrast into my vein. So it's hard to tell if I'm allergic to it or not, because it went into my system, and the system doesn't want that, right? Like, the system's going to decide what it wants to do. So yes, I did have an allergic reaction to the contrast. They put the contrast in so they can, because they were looking at, they were doing MRIs on my back, and they wanted to be able to see all the stem stuff. And so the problem was my body said no to how they put it in there. Like I said, the ER doc was the one that told us that, yeah, that didn't go into your bloodstream, just so you know.
At the VA?
At the VA, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's, I mean, I'm a medic, obviously. I know very, very little about that sort of stuff, but yeah, if they missed your vein, that seems like you, how'd they get you back?
So they, and again, a lot of this stuff is a little ambiguous, but I did get the paddles, and I got, I don't know how many EpiPens, but they shot me full of all kinds of stuff. They got me back, got me down to the ER. My poor wife, I made her take a selfie. I mean, that's like a cherished moment, you know, and she's, the selfie's I'm going to find the selfie. I'm going to send it to you as well.
Well, that's funny. It's funny you say that because, you know, my concussion where I knocked myself out and almost died, when I woke up in the ER, Phil, who's not here with me, my co-host, I had him take a selfie with me with no teeth, and here I am on a gurney bleeding, and Phil, take that selfie. And
that's
so
perfect.
I'm familiar with that sort of thinking and logic behind it. So
good. Yeah. So there, and I was like 5 times the size. My face was like huge. And you'll see it in the photo. I'm a big guy, as it is, but in this photo, I mean, I was pretty lean. I think I was about 220, but I look like I'm 400 pounds in this photo. So it's pretty intense. And my poor wife, she's crying. You can see her eyes are swelled up and everything. But yeah, no, it's intense. Once I came out of that, and I mean, we did our own personal rehab. There was all kinds of stuff going on. Like, I had to relearn how to talk. I had to relearn how to walk. I had to do all these things, but we did it from my home. I didn't want to go.
Death experience.
Yeah, I didn't want to go back.
I don't blame you. I don't blame you.
I didn't tell him anything was wrong, and we were just figuring it out. And luckily, I came out of that, and I've only got a few. Like, my vocabulary and stuff like that seems to slip from time to time. I forget words, but that could also be the T.B.I. So it's one of those things where I'm not sure which one compounded, but I know that didn't help the situation on that part of it, but it did help the pain part. I think it did a reset on my central nervous system. It was pretty interesting.
It very well could have. I mean, I've heard of similar experiences with amputees and that sort of stuff. You know, it kind of can reset their nerve endings. So God may have been looking out for you, and that may have been the reason as to why it happened. Who knows?
Sure.
But that's not out of the realm of possibility, basically is what I'm trying to say. And the reason why I ask is this is what I did when I started going through counseling. I went through that cognitive behavioral therapy sort of counseling. Did you go through any sort of that CBT counseling at all, or no?
I did cognitive therapies. I'm just not, I can't recall which ones.
Gotcha. Okay.
I don't like CBT. People say that, and it doesn't remind me of the one that I did. So I'm not sure if that was the one or not.
For me, it was basically learning how to have conversations that led to the beginning, the middle, and the end of the conversation. You know what I mean? And especially with people, with loved ones, or it was kind of like just developing and working that prefrontal portion of my brain. That's kind of where I started with the CBT into some other things. I mean, I've done my own sort of counseling, my own sort of rehab on my own, just by doing a lot of research about concussions and the different parts of the brain that they do affect. And I kind of, I've watched the movie Concussion about 900 times just to even learn from that. But I'm looking at it right now, the Concussion Repair Manual, and by Dr. Dan Engel, and just have done my own sort of thing, and I wasn't sure what exactly approach other than the prolonged exposure, and you had done to treat that.
Yeah, and since you said that, that's exactly what I did, was that CBT. And now that I'm listening to that, those were the types of therapies that I was doing through, in addition to that prolonged exposure.
Gotcha.
So, yeah, and it works.
Definitely.
I always tell people, it's like, I was not fit for duty. I was not fit to be a cop. I was not fit to be in the Army. Aside from my voluptuous dad bod and grooming standards of my beard today, I'm highly fit for duty.
Yeah. Have you thought about trying to do anything part-time or anything like that?
And they asked me, because obviously with the COVID stuff, the agencies, when they get hit, they let's face it, and right now is a really tough time to want to be even a law enforcement officer, but they've asked me multiple times to come back. It's been pretty cool. And they're on their second sheriff since I've left. And I almost walked the halls of the old department without an escort. It's pretty cool.
That's awesome.
It is. It's not for me anymore. I think I have a different mission these days. I think at this point in time, it's, I want to serve humanize the badge. It's one of the big things we talk about, and how I do that is I do the photography. I create those trading cards for cops.
I had Dan. Christ, he's gonna kill me. Dan or David Edwards. He was one of the first interviews I had for the podcast, and just talking with him was, a pleasure in itself, and learning about where he came from, and obviously, his sons had started the humanizing the badge movement. Yeah, and so I had him on here, and it was great to hear, how they got it started and whatnot, and where it came from, but that's good that you can, essentially go into the PD now and have that open dialogue and communication, and let's get into. If you want to do that, let's get into what you're doing now, and in the WarriorNow, is it Foundation?
It's WarriorNow Inc. Is the organization, and it's mainly the mission is for veteran mental health. It's to help out. We're kind of everything that gets pushed in between the cracks. So that's what the organization does. We set up initially a mentor program. We don't want to be clinical. We just wanted somebody to be on the other end of the line, just to want to talk. If you're going through a divorce, we just need to talk to somebody, and it's not a crisis thing. That's what we're here for. Like, we want to, if somebody's been through a divorce, we got people that have been through a divorce. They can help you out. If you've got a felony, we got people that are mentors with felonies. They want to, walk you through the steps of how to become back and be, productive citizen in society. We have active duty cops. We have CEOs. All these different, people of many different walks of life, active duty, reserve, National Guard, doesn't matter what it was. We even include the Coast Guard for all of you coasties out there.
What about the Space Force yet? Have you
goodness.
I had to ask that question.
I know. And I'm curious for the space trauma that's going to be happening. But
nothing. If I could choose my job in the Space Force, it would be the the door gunner on the spaceship. That's what I'm choosing.
I agree with you. Like, and I want to know, is it blasters, phasers? What are we looking at here? I'm not sure what shoots in space.
I mean, I don't know if I can I say your wife's name on here on the air?
Sure. Yeah.
With that? Yeah. If I don't know if Melinda told you, but my last name is Imperial, just like the Stormship Trooper. So, so if the uniform for the Space Force is anything else but the Imperial Stormship Trooper uniform, I'm gonna be rip shit. But
right.
But
that's epic.
But yeah, but no, it sounds like a great a great organization you guys have over there, and I've been on the website, and I know you guys work a lot with veterans courts in the area, and as far as I know, with the state of New Hampshire, that's where I'm police officer, and I'm not sure about any of the surrounding states because I don't even know if they exist in my state, and I can pretty much guarantee just by that fact, and I mean, I've done my own research, they probably do not. I know that the drug court started a few years ago, but yeah, can you talk a little bit about the working with the Veterans Treatment Court? Yeah,
and that's actually where the mentor program spawned was. So the Veterans Treatment Court is a problem-solving court. So it's similar to drug court, only it addresses, in addition to the addiction, it addresses the mental illness. And I love it because it turns into, it's not your typical court. You walk in to a typical court. Again, you just listen into a judge and the attorneys typically speak. Yeah. You go into Veterans Treatment Court. So it's a post-plea, if I say this correctly. My wife's a former prosecuting attorney, so she might yell at me if I get this all wrong. But once they've pled, you can serve your sentence in Veterans Treatment Court instead of basically going to jail or prison.
So they are convicted of a crime at that point in time.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, they are. And it has to be, depending on the court, there are certain levels of severity of crime that they have to have committed. So they'll obviously, you can qualify with a misdemeanor, but if you don't qualify with a misdemeanor and having an addiction and a mental illness, then it's not a good fit for you, because it's less about the punitive part of it and more about figuring out what's wrong and then addressing it. And
sorry to interrupt you. So for, like, I'm just kind of, I guess I'm looking at it from the law enforcement side right now. Our district level courts in our state handle anything from like a speeding ticket to Class A misdemeanors, which is Class A is up to 1 year in county jail. And then Superior Court would handle anything that's a felony level. 99% of the time they handle mainly felony level cases. I mean, enhanced misdemeanors for like assaulting a police officer or something like that, maybe seen over in district court, I believe, but don't hold me to it. Or a Superior Court, but don't hold me to it. So they are, they face trial in a regular criminal court, and then the plea or sentencing is heard in the Veterans Court itself. Is that how it works?
No. I'm gonna try to explain it, I guess, a little bit better, because the legal process is so interesting, and how you're on the right track, right? Like you get charged. Let's start from start to finish. You commit a crime. You get met with a lovely police officer. They basically give you some jewelry. They take you to the clink. You then go through and you do your first appearance and advising of charges, and then you say, hey, you know what? I was guilty. I can't get away with this. I'm going to go ahead and just plea. Then you plea, or you say, hey, I'm not guilty. I'm gonna take this to trial. Then you go to trial. So those are the two moments. I think most of the people, for example, in the state of Colorado, plea into this. So rather than going through a trial, they say, hey, you know what? I've got all these other things going on. This is a good spot for me because they're going to help me figure these other things out along with it, and I don't have to go to prison. So I'm going to plea into this without taking it to a trial. And we have two city courts, which are similar to your what you were explaining, where they do low end misdemeanors down to traffic. We have 2 city courts out here in the state of Colorado who are veterans treatment courts as well. We have Aurora and Lakewood. And then the rest of our courts, we have 7 district is what we call our superior courts out here, our district courts, where they see the misdemeanors and above all the way up to the high-end felonies that do these treatment courts. And there's you're not alone. There's so many people that don't know about this, and that's one of the things I'm trying to change. I was a cop in the court system, and I would walk and being a veteran, I would take people to this court, and I used to have a negative connotation in my head as a law enforcement officer, like, man, this is just a get out of jail free card. Well, coming out on this side of it and seeing the lives that are being changed and seeing people that were basically trying to become cops never be able to get there because they fell victim to an addiction that was spawned from an injury while they were in service. And then they got back and had to do a UA, got kicked out of the military. So now they have nothing to really go for. And so then all of a sudden
what's that saying that I've said many times? So what's the difference between a cop and a criminal? One bad decision.
That's it. That's it. Agreed. And yeah, so that's what these courts are set up to be able to do is, and so instead of saying, hey, look, you know what? Yeah, you committed this crime. You need to be punished for this. Trust me, there's punitive measures. But more importantly, it's how do we go ahead and say, you know what? Yeah, you committed a crime, but you also had all these other things going on. How do I go ahead and address this and say, you know, if I get this figured out, if we can get this light switch turned back on, can you be a productive citizen in society? And the answer is yes, because the recidivism rate of standard probation compared to veteran treatment court probation is, I mean, it's staggering difference. So it's anywhere on a national level between 7 and 33%. And I know it's a big range, but there's not a lot of studies that have been done about this. And again, this leads to the fact of why do people not know about this? These courts are doing a lot of great things. They're getting people back on track when it comes to their mental health and their addiction. And in order for us to say, hey, if I go sit in prison for 30 years or I come out and I haven't addressed all these things, I'm going to find myself back in prison. But if I go through these programs, you're 70 to 90% basically not going to go back. You're not going to commit another offense. And that's telling. And that's why I'm a big proponent of being a former law enforcement officer, of these VTCs. I think that, the whole point is to be, how do we live better in society anyway? I mean, as a cop, we don't want to arrest people all day long. That's not what we went out there to do. To be honest with you, we went out there to go grab that cat out of the tree and, that was it. Like we didn't want to, we wanted to go wash the fire trucks and yeah.
Yeah, I get you. Yeah. Every cop wants to be a firefighter. Every firefighter wants to be a cop. But
yeah.
That's kind of one of the, I say that the main questions, but one of the questions I did have for you is and a lot of other officers have seen that with the drug courts in our area, that there are a lot of people coming in, and we used to pull a patrol guy in. Somebody's here to take a drug test, go take the drug test down in the cell, and they could be in the middle of a drug treatment court, but they would pop hot, and then some of the times, I'm not going to say every time, because I've been to sentencing for people that I've tested that have pissed hot, but there's a lot of people that it seem like that, I don't want to say they're using the system or taking advantage of it, but man, it gets quite discouraging sometimes when,
sure,
as an officer that, this guy's coming in, he's going to piss hot and nothing's going to happen to him. Do a lot of the patrolmen that you're still friendly with, are they facing that with regards to the veterans and either, like you said, the recidivism rate or whatever it is? Because I had actually been to I'm not sure if it was another podcast I was listening to, but it was kind of explained to me, right? I actually been to a veterans kind of suicide awareness level class from the VA earlier this year. And it was explained to me that veterans should be held to a higher standard because we are used to being held to a higher standard, whether it was in the military. And basically, people, and I don't want to sound like I'm stealing Andy's words because I'm not. It's just the way that the conversation's flowing. But like he said, that, veterans can be seen as, sometimes they have that as that shiny object, like that we got a veteran coming in here. We'll use him or her, and they're going to be great for the organization. But that's why they should be held to the higher standard, because they are used to it. Do you feel like that the officers that you are so friendly with, do they have that, I don't want to say negative connotation, but I guess to get off my soapbox here, but do they, you know what I'm trying to say?
I'm tracking. And yes, so that is something that we do have to retrain. Andy said it. It's something that exists. Most veterans think about it from a handout perspective. Hey, I did this, so you owe me this, and it's like, no, we don't. You get off your ass and go back out there and keep fighting. You got to fight for yourself, and you got to fight for your family. So yes, there's just a different level of respect for people who serve your country, but there should be a different level of respect for people that serve the country, especially if you do it from a militaristic or a humanitarian side. But beyond that, it doesn't mean that you can just get away with things. So we go back to the you piss hot and then nothing's going to happen to you. What I'll direct that conversation to is from the standpoint of just addiction and recovery. There's true addiction. There's going to be a relapse. It's just kind of the way it is. We wish it wasn't that way, and in every case, it's not that way. There are some people that can be in recovery and never ever relapse ever again. But for the most part, it's a high standard or high relapse rate. It's kind of the way it is. So it's an understanding that, hey, we're going to get you sober. We're going to start figuring that out. So let's work on that sobriety. And then if I put you in prison because you fell once, like that's a disservice to you, just because of how controlled substances are, because that's exactly what they do. Once you're hooked on something, it's very difficult to let it go. And I was fortunate. I was able to get rid of my stuff without having to, put on silver bracelets. But most people's addictions lead to DUIs or thefts or some type of criminal charge. And talking with the cops now, I even had a conversation with a cop. He was a Marine vet, and he was working in the vet court. And he said the same thing that I said back when I was a cop. He's like, man, I got out. I never did anything. I never messed up. Like, come on. And I was like, yeah, you're right. And I was standing there saying the same thing until I realized that, these guys have either severe mental illness. They either join the military with trauma, some form of trauma, childhood trauma, or they got it when they were in the military, or it got exacerbated by the military. Their life was basically stripped away from them completely. And that trauma just has a way of playing out differently for people. And, and that's what I just try to guide those conversations. Like, we don't know what they went through to get to this point. Let's just be happy that they're here, because here's a place where we can ensure that they're going to get, they're not having a hand. Somebody's not holding their hand. They're literally holding their feet to the pavement. They're saying, you have to do this. And if you don't, well, guess what? There's, 15, 20, 30 years in prison. And so it's almost, I don't want to say that it's like I better do this so I don't go to prison, but that's a big motivator for some of these guys. And yeah, you are going to see that. You are going to see these guys relapse. And don't hold it against them too much. And I try to talk about it. There is a difference between a druggie and a junkie, a junkie and somebody that's in addiction. Some people just want to get high, and I really don't have anything for you. Like, you're not the type of person I want to be around. You don't belong in society. Like, that's kind of my thought process when somebody's just wants to get high. But if you are addicted to something and you actively know that you have an addiction and you want to get past that, but you can't, well, you're the guy I want to help out, or girl I want to help out. But yeah, it's tough. It's a tough conversation to have, especially from a law enforcement perspective, because we don't look at it that way. We always look at it as, that's illegal, you're going to jail.
Yeah, it's very hard conversation to have, and it's very hard for, I don't say officers to get used to, but like you said, there's a lot of training that has to happen. I mean, I know I had heard it on your podcast, but I actually had heard it when I went to that VA training. Was, we have the list of questions we ask people when they get arrested, and we start asking people if they have served, not if they're veterans, but just if they have served in general, because a lot of people that I mean, if you ask me if I was a veteran, I'm going to tell you no, I haven't earned it yet. And that's not me, like, I don't want to say I'm bragging or whatever, but that's just the way of what I believe. And I think that there are a lot of people that still believe that. And if you ask me if I've served, I'm going to tell you yes, but and then that's how you would find out, that I'm still in the military. And I think that that's something that officers or corrections or whoever is interacting with the person who's going through the judicial system to start asking, and for them to realize, and for the officers to realize, that there are different programs out there for people that have served in the military, and to actually get them in contact with the different organizations that are there to help. Are you guys, is that something that is set up through specifically your area? I know you have people that are mentors probably throughout the entire country, but is that something that if somebody gets arrested, hey, now that, yes, they have served, well, here's Warrior Now, you can reach out to them and, kind of help them guide you. They can help you, you can help guide them through the process. Is that something that happens?
It does happen, yes. And it's so important that you know about the resources that are out there, because, I mean, and drug court was created to help identify the drug issue. Vet court was the same thing. It was created for that very same reason. Why are all of our vets, or not all, but why are a lot of our veterans going to jail? And we make up a big part of the population in the jails, in the prison system. And that's not okay, because we barely make up, a percentage of the actual population. Yet we're that many times more likely to go to prison. So yeah, we can definitely help out on in scenarios like that. We are in the process of going national. We currently operate out of the state of Colorado. We do have mentors from all across the country. That is one thing that we currently do, but we are looking at in the future going and partnering with all of our veterans treatment courts nationwide, so that way we can come in. And one of the things I like to do is I do the education piece. I want to train the booking deputies on what to say, how to ask it, just like you just said. Don't ask if you're a veteran. I like to train the DAs, I like to train the PDs, and I like to train the courts. I think if we all knew about this, whenever you start going up there, and if there's something in your system, that in your brain, that's not firing properly, then this is a great opportunity to get that addressed and get you back into a productive piece of society and not looked at as a criminal, because I hate that. Again, we have criminals. If you are a criminal, I don't like you. But if you're a person that messed up, let's talk. Let's figure this out. Like, I want to help you. Right.
Like I said earlier, the difference between, I've said it many times while working, the people that I'm arresting, the difference between me and you right now is one bad decision. Don't let it be that decision that ruins the rest of your life. You can overcome it and move forward. And the one thing I do love about your website is you guys have quarantine resources on there, and I think that is something that I haven't seen before. But it's, you go under WarriorNow.org, and I forget which above link you have to go to. I think it's go under the About Us, and you have different resources out there for how to pass time during quarantine. And I've had that conversation a lot with people, during this entire COVID quote pandemic. Obviously, it's a bad thing. People have died, but how can you, it's either you're going to either sulk and sit there and not do anything, but even with this podcast probably, I can't say 100% would not have started, but it probably would not have started without COVID, because it gave me some extra time to, fill that time with a hobby, and that's what I chose to do. And I just think that is a great resource out there. If you can speak on that for a little bit.
Yeah, thank you. And that's I want to make it a little more visible. But yeah, I think it's real important for us, especially for our vets and our law enforcement. We understand what isolation is. We're professionals at it. And that's what this is doing, is creating this, like validating us wanting to isolate. So we created a resource list because we want people to you need to build your community. If you have a strong community, then your structure and your purpose are going to be 100% on. I mean, you can work on those things simultaneously. So once you figure out that community piece, and that's where this quarantine resource is, and we're in the process of updating it as well, because I have a bunch of new organizations that want to be added to the list. There's some really cool organizations out there that are willing to be a virtual organization. Comeback Yoga being one, where they just do. It's like a yoga for combat vets. Just a fantastic organization. They'll do it right over the Zoom now. And these types of quarantine resources help us not to isolate, which is actually something that we don't want to do. Social isolation is different from physical isolation, and we need to make sure that we keep our social isolation to a minimum. I'm not going to tell you what to do when it comes to CDC guidelines for physical isolation, but I will tell you that you can still be a social butterfly, if you will, by using these resources that are available online. I mean, we live in the day and age where we can actually do this, but we can still build that strong community. You and I are talking in two different states. Mm-hmm. The last time we dealt with this back in the early 1900s, that's non-existent.
Yeah, you're completely right. You're completely right. And what would be interesting, what may be interesting, I guess is a better way of saying it, but I know that calls to the suicide hotline throughout the pandemic have gone up, and I know that in our state is faced, I forget the percentage, but it was an over 100% increase in suicides throughout the year this year. And
yep.
I know that Blue Help, I was just on their website, the resource for law enforcement, that I think it was 149 officers have been reported to Blue Help this year that have taken their lives in the line of duty. And I know that specific to their program, it's not solely based on that year, because obviously it's a new organization that's out there, newer, and they're gathering past data as well.
Correct.
But that'll just be something that's interesting, throughout the pandemic. How have the numbers changed? And I think it's going to take a few years to gather that info. But that's something, this, if you go on the website, go into the About Us and in the quarantine section, I think that's something that I haven't seen a lot of organizations post, and something that is a great resource for just, you don't even have to be a veteran to use these resources, correct?
Yeah, no, these are just available resources for everybody, is my understanding when I was going through them. We just wanted something that was there that was easy to access. So, yeah.
Yeah, awesome. And a couple follow-up questions for you. I mean, I think we've been going at this for an hour and 51 minutes right now with kind of a break right in the middle. But, if somebody wants to get involved as a mentor, or they have gone through different shit in their life, how can they help out the program? How can they support it?
Yeah, and just right there, just become a mentor. So our mentorship is open to all vets and all families as well. So that being the community piece of the puzzle. The biggest thing is if you're already doing the work. Typically, if you're a veteran, you've got a veteran buddy of yours that is going through something, and you're probably the one that's on the phone call with them or texting them or checking on them. You're already doing it. So just with Warrior Now, what we do is we just give you a few extra tools to start looking out for certain things. We're not turning you into like investigators. We're just giving you the enhanced way to talk to people, to be able to identify these things. Because the goal is that we don't go down those major three. You know, we don't want to go into the grave. We don't want to go into jail. And that rehab piece of the puzzle, if we can identify that, and make it through that rehab, it doesn't have to be an institutionalized rehab. It can be an at-home rehab or whatever type of rehab. But if you can choose that route, you know, that's what Warrior Now is about. We want to help you get down to that path. And so, yeah, if you want to volunteer with us, we absolutely love having mentors. That's 100% of what we do. So always looking for more mentors. I always believe that my goal, my vision is to get with DOD at some point in time and be able to link a PCSing troop with a mentor immediately as soon as they sever ties with the military.
It's a great idea. I mean, you have, and I haven't gone out of the military yet, but I know that there are some programs, and I call them probably programs, with better word is probably classes, that people who are PCSing out of the military that they have to do, and it's whether or not it's a check mark in a box, probably more than than anything else. But it's a good idea to have, just to give that extra sort of social support out there. And yeah, I think that's a good look for your future.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, what kind of just something I wanted to bring up, and obviously I'm going through what will be a transition in my life, but there's kind of some of the, when I talk about mental health, and whether it's for law enforcement, veteran, military, or law enforcement, veteran, or just the general public, what are a couple of the things that I say, because I notice that it's helped me if I'm going through that shitty part in my life, that dark hole where I don't see any sort of light, and and I'm dwelling on whatever it is, and I'm feeling like crap. There's a few things that I try to help people with. Number one, it's literally get out and get up, or get up and get out. Get out of the house, get out of where you are at that point in time, and get yourself moving. Obviously it's going to increase the oxygenated blood flow to your brain, which is going to get you in a better mood immediately. Once you start, getting some vitamin D in your system, getting that increased blood flow. If someone's calling you guys because they feel, suicidal or however it is, what are some of the helpful suggestions that you guys give out to people?
We use our resources. That's a big thing. Don't ever forget that the VA hospital is actually one of the most expensive hospitals in the world. They have a crisis center. So immediately, if somebody's in crisis, you can actually call the crisis hotline on behalf of somebody else. So long as you either have a physical location or a phone number for them to be able to reach out to that individual. So step one is if it's crisis, don't try to be a crisis response team if you're not. If you don't have that skill, reach out to the third-party vendor. Like I said, they'll take your information, and they'll reach out to the veteran. If it's not at crisis and you feel like you just need to be able to talk to them, just literally being available does more for somebody than you would ever know. You don't have to have the right things to say. It's mentors come from all different walks of life, and I tell them all. You don't have to, in fact, you don't ever have to say anything. A listening ear goes a long way. Sometimes people just need to talk. Sometimes they just need to vent. If you can allow them to just get through that, I'm not going to turn you into a counselor, but instead of saying, hey, let's, you should do this, this, and this, say, tell me more. Encourage that person to want to continue talking, because once they get that unloaded, now that it could have been, you could have literally just saved that person's life, because ending that phone call, you don't know where they're going after that. But if you're there to listen to them, you will see an impact. You will definitely feel that impact. That person may never thank you for it, But if they're here 20 years down the road, you can break it down and go back to that one conversation sometimes. So yeah, if I can say anything, it's just to be available.
Awesome. I like hearing that. That's yeah, pretty well said. Brian, do you have anything else you'd like to say or bring up? I mean, now we've gone on about almost 2 hours, not quite as long as Andy's podcast, but pretty long here. So
no, I love
is there
it.
Anything,
yeah, thank you.
Anything else you'd like to go right ahead?
Yeah, no, thank you. Thanks for talking about mental health, because this is what we got to do, right? Like we have to normalize this conversation. And I talked to, I did a presentation to one of the congressmen, and somebody got on there, and I use the word mental illness a lot because I want people to hear that word, and I want people to get comfortable saying that word, because you don't address mental health, you address mental illness. You strive for mental health. That's what we're trying to do here. And you have to be comfortable with saying the words. If you think somebody is suicidal, be comfortable in saying the word. Just, hey, are you going to kill yourself? Are you thinking about that? Like, feel free to just point blank say it. Now, there are SAVE trainings. The VA does a community-based SAVE training, which we host once a quarter through WarriorNow. So you can have that. The SAVE is the suicide prevention training that the VA basically sponsors. But yeah, I just my biggest thing is you got to talk about these things. And this is not just something that impacts our veteran society. Obviously, we know that the numbers roughly are about 139, I think right now, people that are committing suicide per day. And that's just people in our society. That's in America. Our law enforcement officers, our first responders, our veterans, we're all just a little niche group of that bigger number. Right. So if you can take anything away, you don't have to be a vet to understand the importance of structure, camaraderie, and purpose. You need to have structure, build your camaraderie, which is your community, and then start figuring out what your purpose is. Find an organization to get involved with if you have the time and ability. I mean, and it doesn't have to be something that you don't have to be a veteran to join a veteran nonprofit. You don't have to have special needs to join a special needs nonprofit. So yeah, just find your purpose. And it doesn't have to be a nonprofit. It could be working out. It could be playing football. Whatever it is that you want to do, just make sure you have that purpose. Yeah.
Right. You know, I've often thought about getting back into jiu-jitsu, and I don't know if sounds like you've done or experienced a little bit of that. But there's a community with regards to jiu-jitsu. Obviously, you're out there training a couple times a week with the same people, obviously, or it may change every now and then, but generally the same people, and it forms that sense of community where somebody may be looking for that, or looking for friends, or you know, they're getting out of the military and or law enforcement, or just transitioning in life to a different one career to another. You don't even have to, like you said, you don't even have to be a veteran, but you could just be transitioning into life, and it you know, having that structure, camaraderie, and purpose, you know, having that structure of like, hey, I'm going here 2 times a week for these, you know, 1-hour sessions, and they're on every Tuesday and every Saturday. And then you have a structure of, this is what you're doing, you know, having those certain people there, and your purpose with becoming, I take a lot of online leadership classes, and one of the guys that I asked that same question about transitioning from being a law enforcement officer to potentially doing something else, he said, you know, trying to strive to become the best at what you're doing, whatever it is. If you're going to be the best husband, be the best. Strive to be the best husband. If you're going to be strive to be the best son, the best employee, or the best employer. Whatever you're doing, just strive to be the best. And if it's something that, you know, you may be going out of the military, for sake of argument, as a medic, and then going into something in a non-EMS role whatsoever. So pick whatever it is that's far from me. Farming, I don't care. But, you know, striving to be the best at what you're doing at that point in time with your life, and with striving to become the best, finds that purpose. And,
sure.
Yeah, and that's, you know, I guess, get off on another soapbox, or, you know, whatever.
But it's an important one.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I tend to do that every now and then. But, no, I appreciate you coming on, Brian. It means a lot to me. You know, it means a lot to me that you guys reached out back, you know, immediately. And yeah, this is definitely a great interview. And I'm just thankful that you were able to donate a couple hours on a Sunday to get this done.
Yeah, well, I'm a Cowboys fan, so right now, this is much better than watching my Cowboys lose.
Well, I was listening to the Pats game before this, and I guess I'm gonna have to go back and see how it turned out because it should be over by now. So they were losing when I turned it off. So, but I appreciate it, Brian. Where can people find you in the organization?
Yeah, WarriorNow.org. All of our Instagram handle or social media handles are typically either WarriorNow or WarriorNow Inc. But yeah, WarriorNow.org is the easiest way that you can come out and you can get the about us, the contact us, all from there. So
awesome. All right, Brian. Well, I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you.